At 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone lit up on the nightstand. It was a message from my daughter, Lauren. "Mom, I know you paid for this house, but Grant's mother doesn't want you at Christmas dinner. I hope you understand." I read those words once, then again, then a third time. Each time they landed heavier than the last. I did not answer right away. I lay there in the dark with the screen glowing against the ceiling, and I felt something inside me settle in a way it had never settled before. At that hour of the morning, everything weighs more. The silences press down harder. The truths you have been carrying for years finally become too heavy to keep holding. I had paid $312,000 so that my daughter and her husband could have a decent home, a house with a yard and a maple tree by the fence with wide windows that caught the morning sun. A house where apparently I was no longer welcome. I got up slowly without turning on the lamp and looked out at the empty street. Down the block, the Halverson family had left their Christmas lights on all night, blinking faintly through the cold red and gold and then dark. I thought about all the times I had stayed quiet, all the times I had smiled when something cut me, all the times I had said it's fine when nothing about it was fine. My name is Jenna Ellington. I am 61 years old. For 34 years, I worked as a labor and delivery nurse, which means I spent most of my life helping other women bring their children into the world. I have held more newborns than I could count, watched more families begin than I can remember. And on that morning of the 15th of December, in the quiet of my own small apartment, something in me changed for good. I picked up my phone and typed one word: understood. But what none of them knew, not my daughter, not her husband Grant, and certainly not that mother-in-law who had erased me from the Christmas table, was that the house was still in my name. I had paid for every square foot of it. I had signed the deed alone. And that morning, tired of being invisible, tired of being useful only when something was needed from me, tired of always being the one who gave way, I made a decision. A decision that would change everyone's Christmas. I was not going to that dinner. That much was certain. But neither were they. None of them was ready for what was already in motion, because sometimes when a woman finally gets tired, she does not shout. She simply moves, and the consequences arrive on their own. Sometimes we trust the wrong people for far too long. Have you ever been let down by someone you loved with your whole heart? Tell me your story in the comments. I would truly like to read it. 2 years earlier, when Lauren first brought Grant to meet me, I was happy. My daughter had found a man who seemed steady and polite, a man who owned his own restaurant downtown and talked about the future with the kind of confidence that puts a mother at ease. I remember the afternoon they came to my house to tell me they were getting serious. Lauren wore a pale yellow sweater, and she had that light in her eyes that only real hope can put there. "Mom," she said, squeezing my hand across the table, "I want you to meet Grant's family next Sunday." So I did what I always do. I cooked. I made a roast chicken and cornbread dressing, the same dressing my own mother taught me to make when I was a girl, standing on a stool at her elbow. I set the table with the good cloth, the one with the small embroidered edge that I only take out for the days that matter. They arrived right on time. Grant, his father Roger, and her, Diane Prescott. A tall woman with silver hair styled so perfectly it looked lacquered, the kind of woman whose elegance is meant to remind you of your own plainness. She wore a strand of pearls and a smile that never once reached her eyes. "A pleasure, Mrs. Ellington," she said, taking my hand for exactly 1 second. What a cozy little house. That word stayed with me. She did not say lovely. She did not say warm. She said cozy the way a person says small when they are too polished to say it out loud. During the meal, she barely touched the chicken. "Oh, I have such a delicate stomach," she said, resting 2 fingers against her collarbone. "I really can't manage anything too rich." Grant ate with a good appetite. Roger complimented me twice on the dressing. But Diane looked at everything, the furniture, the walls, the photographs, me, as though she were pricing it all and finding the numbers disappointing. When they left, Lauren hugged me at the door and whispered, "Aren't they wonderful, Mom?" I smiled and nodded. But something in me had already noticed the way that woman looked at me, and the way that look made me feel like less. Still, I said nothing, because a mother will swallow a great deal for the sake of her daughter's happiness. Even the first small warnings that arrive before anything has gone wrong. The wedding was lovely. I paid for Lauren's dress $4,000 I took from my savings without a second thought. Diane arranged the reception in an elegant hall that looked like a photograph from a magazine. But when the time came for the couple to thank the people who had made it possible, Grant thanked his mother and his father and no one else. Lauren found my face from the head table. I lifted my glass and mouthed, "It's all right, my love." But it was not all right, and I was beginning somewhere underneath to understand that. About a year later, when Lauren and Grant had been renting a cramped apartment near his restaurant, they invited me to lunch. The place was small, but they had made it careful and warm. Mom Lauren said, taking Grant's hand across the table, "We have something to ask you. We want to buy a house," Grant continued, "but between the restaurant loans and everything else, we can't put together enough for it on our own." Lauren looked at me with the same eyes she has had since she was 4 years old. "Mom, do you think you could help us?" I had spent 34 years getting up before dawn and driving to the hospital in the dark. I had saved with a discipline that came from raising a child alone after Ray died 12 years back when Lauren was still in high school. That money was meant to be my security in old age, the thing that would let me grow old without becoming a burden to anyone. But when my daughter looked at me like that and asked, all I said was, "How much do you need?" While I am telling you all of this, I find myself wondering where you are listening from. Write the name of your town in the comments. I would like to picture you there. The number was large. $312,000, nearly all of it in cash, the fruit of 34 years of early mornings and double shifts and small, careful choices. It was not every dollar I had, but it was most of them. And when I saw Lauren's face the day I told her yes, I believed it was worth it. God help me, I believed it completely. The house sat on a quiet street called Willowcrest Court on the north edge of Columbus, in a neighborhood where the lawns were trimmed and the mailboxes matched. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths a yard with a young maple, and a bright kitchen with windows that looked out over the grass. The day we walked through it empty, Lauren moved from room to room with her hands pressed to her chest, smiling like a little girl. "Our room can go here, Mom, and the nursery here when the time comes." Then she stopped in the smallest bedroom, the one by the window at the end of the hall. "And this one," she said, "will be yours." I stood still. "Mine." "Of course, Mom," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "You're helping us with the whole thing. It's only right that you have your own room here for when you visit, for when you want to stay." Grant nodded from the doorway. "Absolutely, Mrs. Ellington. This is your home, too." I felt my chest fill up like a glass under a tap. Maybe I thought maybe everything really is going to be all right. Maybe this is not only money. Maybe it is a place where I belong. We signed the papers at the closing that spring. On the advice of my lawyer, a careful old friend named Warren Dawson, who had handled my taxes for years, I put the house entirely in my own name. Lauren and Grant were listed as residents, nothing more. "Jenna," he told me across his desk, "if you are putting in this kind of money, protect yourself. Keep the property in your name for at least 2 years. After that, if you still want to, you can transfer it to them. But for now, protect yourself." I nodded, though a part of me felt ashamed for even agreeing. What kind of mother, I thought, guards herself against her own daughter? When I told Lauren the house would be in my name for a while, she did not object. "That's perfectly fair, Mom," she said. "It's your money after all. When we can pay you back, we'll do the transfer then." But that same evening, while I was in her kitchen making coffee, I heard Grant on the phone in the next room. "Yes, Mom," he said, his voice low. "Yes. Mrs. Ellington is putting up the money, but the house is going in her name." A pause. "No, Mom, it isn't distrust. It's just what her lawyer recommended." Another pause. "Yes, I know, but we can't say anything to her about it. Without her money, there's no house." I carried the coffee tray back into the living room as though I had heard nothing at all. But something had already shifted quietly under the floor of everything. Over the following months, I helped them fill that house. I bought the refrigerator and the washing machine and paid half the living room set. I gave them an old oak dining table I had found years before at an estate sale, a heavy, beautiful thing long enough to seat 8. "So we can have real family dinners, my love," I told Lauren as the movers carried it in. She hugged me tight. "You're the best mom in the world." There is something else you should understand because it matters later. From the very first month, it was my name on more than the deed. The property taxes came to me. The homeowner's insurance came to me. I had set it up that way at the closing, quietly meaning to hand it over once they found their feet, and somehow that day never came. Every autumn I paid the tax bill on Willowcrest Court. Every spring I paid the insurance premium. Lauren and Grant never asked how those things were handled. They simply assumed, I suppose, that it was all included the way a person assumes the sun will come up. It did come up every time. I was the one who paid for the light. The first time I went to stay in my room, I arrived on a Friday afternoon with a small suitcase and a buttermilk pie I had baked that morning still warm in its tin. I rang the bell. Lauren opened the door and her face did something strange when she saw me. "Mom," she said, "you didn't tell me you were coming." "Yes, I did, my love. I sent you a message yesterday." "Oh," she said, glancing back over her shoulder. "I didn't see it. It's just that Grant invited his parents for dinner." And there behind her sat Diane on the sofa I had helped pay for drinking tea from a china cup. She looked me up and down. "Mrs. Ellington," she said. "What a surprise." She did not stand. "Good evening, Diane," I said, stepping inside with my little suitcase. Mom, Lauren said quickly, "You're in your room, right? It's just that Diane's already settled in the guest room." I stopped where I stood. The guest room, the room Lauren had told me in this very house would be mine. "Of course, my love," I said with a smile that had already begun to cost me something. No trouble at all. I carried my suitcase up the stairs. But when I opened the door to my room, it was no longer the bright empty space it had been. There were boxes stacked against the wall, Grant's old coats crowding the closet and exercise bike parked in the corner with a towel over the handlebars. My room had quietly become the place where they kept the things they had no room for. I sat down on the edge of the bed and breathed. "Don't cry, Jenna. Don't you cry." I went back down half an hour later with the pie in my hands. "I brought a buttermilk pie," I said, trying to sound light. Diane wrinkled her nose. "Oh, what a shame," she said. "I already brought a lemon tart from the French bakery on Broad Street. We've put it in the refrigerator." Grant would not meet my eyes. Lauren took the pie from my hands. "Thanks, Mom. We'll save it for tomorrow." But I knew the way you know weather that no one would eat it. Through dinner, Diane talked without pause about her garden club, about her travels, about how impossible the cost of everything had become. Roger nodded along at each of his wife's opinions. Grant laughed in all the right places. Lauren served the food in silence. And I sat at the oak table I had bought in the house I had paid for, feeling myself grow fainter by the minute, like a photograph left too long in the sun. At one point, Diane gestured at the curtains. "Lauren, dear, those are terribly plain. I know a wonderful shop that carries imported ones. Let me give them to you for Christmas." "Oh, Diane, how generous," Lauren said. "This house has such potential," Diane went on. "It only wants a few touches of real taste." Real taste. As though nothing I had put into it counted for anything at all. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said. "My head aches a little. I think I'll lie down." No one protested. I climbed back up to my room, lay on top of the quilt, and stared at the ceiling. I did not cry that night. But something in me began to crack quietly the way a windshield cracks in the cold, a small star that you know will spread. Because a person can endure a great deal. But to feel invisible in the very place you built with your own hands, that is a particular kind of pain, one that does not have a proper name. And the worst of it was only beginning. The months that followed were a long string of small injuries. Lauren began to call me less. We used to talk every day. Now 3 or 4 days would pass without a word. When I did reach her, she was always halfway out the door. "Mom, I'll call you back. I'm at the store with Diane. Mom, we're having lunch with Grant's parents." Diane, always Diane. One Saturday I asked my love, "Don't we do our Sunday coffees anymore?" "Oh, Mom, Grant and I do brunch with his parents on Sundays. Now it's a tradition in their family." "What if I came along one Sunday?" I said. "Diane's very particular about that time, Mom. It's her morning with Grant." As if my son-in-law had quietly become Diane's son who happened to be married to my daughter. "It's all right, my love," I said in a voice beginning to sound false even to me. I hung up and looked a long while at the photograph of Lauren at her nursing pinning, beaming in her white coat, with my hand on her shoulder. That day she had said, "Mom, everything I am, I owe to you." At what point had that stopped being true for her? I decided the fault might be mine. Perhaps I was the one drifting. Perhaps I needed to try harder, be easier to have around. So I began bringing them food every week, the chicken and dumplings and vegetable soup that Lauren had loved since she was small. The first few times she took the containers gladly. But little by little, the warmth drained out of it, until one afternoon she met me at the door, looking tired, and said, "Mom, you don't have to cook for us like this. Diane brings us food too. The refrigerator's already full." I stepped into the kitchen to set my dish down, and there I saw a row of elegant glass containers with printed labels. Diane's wild rice pilaf, Diane's roasted beet salad. My old plastic dish looked shabby beside all of it. "It's really good," Mom, Lauren said behind me, but her voice did not sound like she meant it. I drove home with a knot in my throat, and I did not cry because by then I was learning not to. In October, Lauren turned 30. I planned it for weeks, reserving a table at a restaurant she had loved for years and inviting her closest friends, my sister Gail and Grant. I sent the invitation a full week ahead. Lauren called that same night. "Mom, that's so sweet, but—" And my stomach dropped at the word, but Diane's already planned a surprise dinner for me that evening. "Lauren, I sent the invitation a week ago," I said. "I know, Mom, but it's all set. She's hired a caterer, ordered a cake. I can't tell her no. But you can tell me no," I said before I could stop the words. There was a long silence. "You know what, my love," I finally said, "you're right. Go to your mother-in-law's dinner. I'll cancel the reservation." I canceled it and lost the deposit. That night I sat alone at my table and took out the gift I had bought her, a fine silver bracelet with a small heart charm, and inside the heart, in letters so small, you had to hold it to the light, it said "Mother and Daughter Always." I put it back in its velvet box and slid it into the drawer where I had begun to keep the things I no longer knew what to do with. On her birthday, she texted me a photograph from Diane's dinner, the long gold table, the tall cake, Diane beside the couple wearing a smile like a trophy. "Missed you, Mom, but it was beautiful," it read. "Thanks for understanding." I wrote back, "Happy birthday, my love. God keep you always." I said nothing about the deposit or the bracelet in the drawer, because that is what mothers do, is it not? We swallow it. We smile. We say everything is fine while something quiet in us goes on dying. November came in unusually cold. Lauren called me one Wednesday evening. "Mom, do you have plans for Christmas?" My heart lifted in spite of everything. Christmas was ours. Since Lauren was a little girl, we had spent Christmas Eve together, just the two of us in the early years, mashing potatoes and singing along to the radio and letting the turkey rest too long because we were talking. Well, I said, trying to sound easy, I assumed we'd spend it together like always. "It's going to be a little different this year, Mom." Different. That word again. Diane wants to host Christmas dinner at our house. She says the stairs at her place are getting hard on her knees, so we thought it would be nice to have everyone at the new house. Our house, I thought. The house I paid for. "I understand," I said. "And me, I'll be there." "Of course, Mom. Your family," I breathed out. "That's fine, my love. I'll bring the cornbread dressing and a buttermilk pie like always." There was a pause. "Mom, it's just Diane's already planned the whole menu. She's bringing everything. But I always make the Christmas dressing, Lauren. I know, Mom, but you know how she is. She likes it all a certain way." "A certain way. Her way. Then let me just bring the pie," I said. "Honestly, Mom, don't worry about a thing. Just come and enjoy yourself. You don't need to bring anything. You don't need to bring anything." Except that what she was telling me without knowing she was telling me was that there was no longer a place at that table for anything of mine. That my seat there had already quietly been given to someone else. But I did not know that yet. I still believed that if I made myself smaller, quieter, easier, I could go on fitting into the edges of my daughter's life. I still wonder even now whether I did the right thing by staying quiet so long. And you, what would you have done in my place? December arrived with all its lights and all its promises. The streets downtown glowed. The radio played carols. And I let myself believe foolishly that Christmas dinner at Lauren's house might be a fresh start, that Diane and I might come to some kind of peace. If only I tried hard enough, that this might be the year we finally became something like a family. How little I understood. On the 10th of December, I went to the mall to buy Lauren's gift. I walked through the bright aisles, past young couples with their arms full of bags, past children pointing at the tree by the entrance, past families taking pictures, and I felt as alone as I had ever felt in my life. But I kept walking. In a jewelry shop, I found a set of earrings and a slender necklace with pale blue stones. Lauren has always loved blue. "It's for my daughter," I told the young woman behind the counter. "What a lucky daughter," she said, smiling. I paid $240 money that was harder to part with now than it once would have been because my savings had grown thin after Willowcrest Court. But I told myself it was worth it. I still believed, God help me, that love could be handed across a counter in a small, wrapped box. That same afternoon, while I was drinking coffee in the food court, my phone rang. It was Gail. "Jenna, are you busy?" "No, I'm at the mall. Is something wrong?" "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I don't know if I should. But I think you have a right to know." My heart began to knock against my ribs. "What is it, Gail?" "Last night I was at the grocery store," she said, "and I saw Lauren there with Diane over in the seasonal aisle. I was going to say hello, but I heard what they were saying." Gail paused. "What did you hear Diane was telling Lauren that having you at the Christmas dinner made her uncomfortable?" The floor seemed to tilt under my chair. "What, yes, Jenna," she said. "Lauren, dear, I understand she's your mother, but the truth is I'm just not comfortable with her at our family gatherings. She's so, how shall I put it, so very plain. She doesn't really fit our world." I closed my eyes. Plain. That word went through me like a needle. "And what did Lauren say?" I asked, though I was not at all sure I wanted the answer. Gail let out a long breath. "She didn't defend you, Jenna." She was quiet for a moment. And then she said, "I know Diane, but I can't just tell her not to come. She's my mother. I can't just tell her not to come." As though I were an obligation. As though my presence at my own daughter's Christmas were a weight to be carried. "Are you still there?" Jenna Gale asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm here. I'm so sorry, sister, but I thought you'd want to know." "Thank you, Gail." I hung up and sat there at that little table surrounded by other people's Christmas laughter, my coffee going cold in front of me. And for the first time in many months, I felt something other than hurt. I felt anger, clean and clear, and my own. I did not sleep that night. I turned it all over in the dark, every conversation, every gesture, every word I had let myself ignore. The "I'll call you back" that never came. The "you don't need to come" wrapped in a false smile. The Diane's already handled it that had erased me from every plan. My daughter had been pushing me toward the door for the better part of a year, and I had been too frightened of losing her to see it. At 2 in the morning, I got up and turned on my computer. I opened the folder where I kept the house documents, the deed, the closing statement, the proof of the wire transfer for $312,000. And there beside them, without quite meaning to, I opened the other folder, the one where I kept the tax receipts and the insurance statements. 2 years of them. Every payment in my name, not one in theirs. I sat back in my chair in the blue light of the screen and understood fully for the first time what I had spent 2 years refusing to understand. I was not a guest in that house who had been treated poorly. I was its owner and its keeper, and the invisible hand that had paid for the roof over their heads and the very warmth in the rooms. And they had looked at me for 2 years and seen a plain old woman who did not fit their world. I printed the deed. I printed the tax receipts. I put them in a folder and set the folder on the corner of my desk, and I did not yet know why. I only knew I needed them close. I stood at my window as the sky over Columbus began to go gray at the edges. Down the block, the Halversons' Christmas lights had finally gone dark. I thought of all the children I had helped into the world across 34 years, all those first cries in cold, bright rooms, all those mothers weeping with joy. I had built a whole life out of showing up for other people at the moment they needed it most. And somewhere in that life I had taught my own daughter, without ever meaning to, that I was a person who would always, always give way. I looked at the folder on the desk. I was done giving way. I did not know yet exactly what I would do. But I knew standing there in the cold morning light that the woman who paid for that house was not going to spend one more Christmas made invisible inside it. And that clarity, that hard, clean clarity, is the most dangerous thing a woman who has been underestimated for far too long can finally allow herself to hold. The next morning I did something I had not done in a very long time. I stopped waiting. For most of my life, waiting had been my particular talent. I waited for Lauren to call for Diane to soften for someone to notice how much I gave and give a little back. But that morning, with the folder of documents on my desk and the anger cooled into something harder and more useful, I understood that no invitation was ever coming. So I stopped waiting and I began to look. I called Gail first. "Tell me exactly what you heard I said. Not the parts you softened. All of it. Jenna, I don't want to be the one who..." "Gail, I said I've been protected from the truth for 2 years, mostly by my own hand. Please don't protect me anymore." So she told me all of it. That Diane had called me plain and small and out of place, and that Lauren had not said a single word in my defense, only that she could not tell her own mother not to come. It hurt exactly as much the second time. But underneath the hurt, my mind had begun to work the way it used to on a hard night in the delivery ward when something was wrong and there was no time to be afraid. Because a question had lodged itself in me and would not leave. Why now Diane had looked down on me from the first afternoon from the first cozy little house? That was not new. What was new was the sudden urgency of it, the push to have me gone by Christmas, the strange heat of a woman who was usually so cool. People who are merely snobbish do not work that hard. Snobbery is lazy. It sits on a sofa and wrinkles its nose. What I had been feeling from Diane these last months was not laziness. It was a kind of hurry. And people only hurry when they need something. So I called Warren Dawson. I sat across from him that Thursday in the same office where I had signed the papers 2 years before, and I laid out the deed and the tax receipts and the insurance statements on his desk the way you lay out symptoms for a doctor. Warren, I said I need to understand exactly what I own and exactly what I can do. He put on his glasses and went through the papers slowly, the only sound in the room the turning of pages. When he finished, he took the glasses off again and looked at me over them. Jenna, he said you are the sole legal owner of this property. Your name is the only name on the deed. Lauren and Grant have no ownership interest whatsoever. They are in the eyes of the law occupants living there at your permission. And these, he tapped the tax receipts, these do you a great deal of good. 2 years of you paying the taxes and the insurance out of your own accounts in your own name, and not one payment from them. That is not the paper trail of co-owners. That is the paper trail of an owner and her guests. So what can I do, I asked. Legally. Anything you consider appropriate, he said. You can live in it, rent it, or sell it. And because they have no lease and pay no rent if you wished them to leave, you would give them proper written notice, and if it came to it, ask a court to confirm it. In Ohio, that would begin with a notice to leave the premises. He said it plainly the way he said everything, but I felt the weight of it settle over the room. And if I wanted to sell, I said, how long would that take? He studied me for a moment. Is it that serious, Jenna? I did not answer with words. He sighed. If you listed it the ordinary way, months. If you took a cash offer from an investor willing to sell as is and price it to move 3 or 4 weeks. There are funds that do nothing but buy houses like yours in neighborhoods like that one. But Jenna, he said, and his voice changed before we speak of any of that, there is something you should let me look into. You asked me why now. So did I while you were talking. Give me a few days. I did not understand what he meant, but I trusted him, and I told him so. 2 days later, he called me at home. Jenna, he said, are you sitting down? I sat. I ran a search this morning, he said. Public court records, nothing improper, all of it open to anyone who knows where to look. There is a foreclosure action filed against Diane and Roger Prescott. The bank began proceedings in September. Their home is not paid off the way that woman would have everyone believe. It is heavily mortgaged, they have fallen badly behind, and unless something changes, they will lose it early in the new year. I sat very still in my kitchen with the phone against my ear. September. Diane's sudden hurry had a date now, and the date was September. That was the month the world had begun to close in on her. That was the month I realized that she had decided quietly that I needed to be gone, because a woman about to lose her grand house needs somewhere to go. And there was a house on Willowcrest Court, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a young maple in the yard paid for, and mortgage-free. A house full of her son and her son's obliging wife, and one plain old woman in the way. I understood then that I had never been merely disliked. I had been an obstacle. And Diane Prescott did not tolerate obstacles. Thank you, Warren, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Get me the names of those funds. That should have been the whole of it. It was already more than enough. But the truth, when it finally decides to come out, does not come out in a tidy line. It comes out all at once, tripping over itself as though it has been waiting years for the door to open. And 2 days after Warren's call, the door opened the rest of the way. My phone rang on a Saturday morning with a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go. Mrs. Ellington, a bright professional voice said when I answered. This is Paige calling from Buckeye Title and Signing Services. I'm just confirming the appointment to sign your documents. We have you down for the 27th, but I wanted to verify the address where the signer would prefer to meet. I stood very still in my living room. I have no appointment to sign anything, I said. There was a small pause. Oh, the young woman said. I'm sorry, let me check. I have a file opened under the Willowcrest Court property. The instructing party listed is a Mr. Grant Prescott. It's a quitclaim deed transferring the property from Jenna Ellington to Grant Prescott. He indicated the current owner would be signing. I just need to confirm. The room went quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet when the floor has just dropped out of it. A quitclaim deed. A quitclaim deed is the simplest instrument in the world for signing away a house. You do not sell. You do not receive money. You simply put your name to one page and the property that was yours becomes someone else's cleanly and forever. My name to one page in Willowcrest Court would belong to Grant. "Thank you," I said, and I was proud of how calm I sounded. "I think there's been a mix-up on our end. Let me speak with my family and call you back to confirm." "Of course, Mrs. Ellington," she said, and gave me the file number and hung up, having no idea what she had just handed me. I called Warren before I had even sat down. "A quitclaim," I said. "Grant has ordered a quitclaim deed. There's a signing scheduled for the 27th. They meant to have me sign it 2 days after Christmas." Warren was quiet for a moment. "Jenna," he said, "do you see what they were planning?" "Tell me anyway," I said, "because I need to hear you say it." "They were going to bring you a stack of papers," he said, "and tell you a story. That the 2 years were up. That it was finally time to do what you had always promised, to put the house in the children's name. They would make it sound like love, like the natural next step, and you, trusting your daughter, would have signed it. And the moment you did, the house would have belonged to Grant alone." And then I said, "And then," Warren said heavily, "a man who owns a house free and clear can walk into a bank and borrow against it. He can take out a mortgage on a property that was until that afternoon entirely yours. A restaurant that is drowning in debt needs cash. A paid-off house is cash if you can only get your name on the deed. He was never going to keep that house safe for the family Jenna. He was going to spend it." I sat down at last. I thought of all the times someone had told me over the years how lucky my daughter was to have a mother who would give her anything. I thought of the 2 years I had quietly paid the taxes, meaning one day to sign the house over back when I still believed that giving was the same as being loved. And do you know, I said to Warren, the strangest part? If they had only waited, if they had only been kind to me, I might have signed it for real. I had always meant to. He was quiet. "I know," he said. "That is what makes it cruel." There was one thing more Warren told me that afternoon, and it stayed with me. "You know," he said, "if you had transferred it to them 2 years ago, the way you first intended as a gift, you would have had to report it. A gift of that size, $312,000, well over the yearly limit, means filing a federal gift tax form. Most people never owe a cent because of the lifetime exclusion, but the paperwork is real, and the record is real. My point, Jenna, is that everything about that house has always run through you. The purchase, the taxes, the insurance, even the paperwork a gift would have required. There is not one thread of it that does not begin and end with your name. They simply forgot that. Or they counted on you forgetting it. I did not go to the police, though a part of me wanted to. What Grant had ordered was not yet a crime. He had scheduled a signing for a document I had not agreed to sign. If I had signed it in ignorance, that would have been fraud, and it would have been theirs to answer for. But I had not signed it. I had found it first. And there is a particular power in knowing a thing that the people plotting against you do not know you know. I decided sitting in my kitchen that Saturday that I would keep that power a little while longer. Still, I needed to be sure. I needed to look my daughter in the eye. Not to accuse her. To give her one last chance to be the girl who once said, "Everything I am, I owe to you." So on a Monday in the middle of December, I drove to Willowcrest Court without calling ahead. Grant answered the door in sweatpants, a coffee mug in his hand, and his face when he saw me was not the face of a man glad to see his wife's mother. "Mrs. Ellington," he said. "We didn't know you were coming. I came to see Lauren," I said. "Is she home?" "She's upstairs," he said, and stepped back to let me in, and I could see him already reaching for his phone. I walked into my house. The living room had changed again. The plain curtains were gone, replaced by the heavy imported ones Diane had promised. The sofa I had helped pay for was buried under embroidered pillows I had never seen. And on the mantel, where a photograph of Lauren and me at her nursing pinning had stood for 2 years, there was now a large gold-framed picture of the Prescotts. All of them, Grant and Lauren and Roger and Diane, arranged in front of a Christmas tree that was not even in this house. I looked for my photograph. It was gone. They had not just crowded me out of the rooms. They had taken me down off the wall. I told Grant I would wait for Lauren in the kitchen, and he went upstairs to fetch her. And that is how I came to be standing at the counter of the house I had paid for when I heard his voice drifting down the stairwell. He had not gone to get Lauren at all. He had gone somewhere private to make a call, and he had not lowered his voice enough because it did not occur to him that the plain old woman in the kitchen was worth lowering it for. "Mom," he was saying, "she's here. No, she just showed up. I don't know. Look, it doesn't matter. Everything's still fine." The signing's set for the 27th. A pause. Yes, Mom, I know. Relax. Lauren already talked to her about it weeks ago in a soft way, planting the idea. She'll sign. Another pause, and then the words that I have never been able to forget, the words that finished whatever was left to finish inside me. You worry too much, he said. That woman has never once said no to Lauren in her life. She'll sign anything we put in front of her, and she'll thank us for letting her. I stood in that kitchen and I did not move. I did not cry out. I did not drop the glass in my hand. I have delivered babies in the worst hours of the night with my own heart pounding and my face perfectly calm, and I called on all of that now, because it was not only Grant's voice I had heard. It was what his voice revealed. Lauren already talked to her about it in a soft way, planting the idea. My daughter had not been a bystander to this. She had not merely failed to defend me. She had been part of the machinery. She had softened me up gently over weeks, so that when the paper came I would sign it like a good and grateful mother. The betrayal was not that she had stood by while others hurt me. The betrayal was that she had helped. When Lauren finally came down in her robe with her hair loose and said, "Mom, is everything okay? You look pale." I looked at my daughter, and I felt the last soft thing in me turn to something else. Something quiet and clear and very hard. "I'm fine, my love," I said. "I only came to see your face." We sat in the living room under the imported curtains beside the mantel where my photograph used to be, and we talked, and I let her tell me small, comfortable lies about how busy Christmas was and how much Diane was doing for everyone. I asked her lightly whether there was anything she wanted to talk to me about, anything at all, and I watched her have the chance. The real and final chance to say, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." And I watched her let it pass. "Not yet, Mom," her eyes seemed to say. "After Christmas. After you've signed." She smiled at me and offered me coffee, and I understood that the daughter I had raised had made her choice, and that it was not me. "Mom," she said as I stood to go, "you'll be there Christmas Eve, right? Diane's doing the whole dinner. All you have to do is come." I looked at her for a long moment. "I'll be there," I said, and I meant it, though not in the way she thought. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel, and I did not go to pieces because there was no longer anything left to break. Everything that could break in me had already broken cleanly in a kitchen, listening to a man I had welcomed into my family call me a woman who would sign anything and thank him for it. What was left was not grief. Grief is for things you have lost. This was something colder and more useful. This was resolve. That afternoon I called Warren and told him everything, the overheard call, the soft planting of the idea, all of it. When I finished, there was a silence on the line, and then he said in a voice I had never heard him use, "All right, Jenna. Tell me what you want to do." And this time I did not hesitate. "I want to sell the house," I said. "I want to accept a cash offer as quickly as it can be done from one of those funds you mentioned. I want the sale agreement signed before Christmas so that by the time the 24th arrives, the thing is already done and cannot be undone. And Warren, I want you to prepare the notice for Lauren and Grant to leave the premises. The proper notice, everything by the law, 30 days, all of it clean. But I don't want it delivered until I say." He was quiet a moment. "When do you plan to deliver it?" he asked. I looked out my window at the gray December sky. "On Christmas Eve," I said. "During the dinner. Right after Diane raises her glass to her wonderful house." "Jenna," he said gently, "you understand that once the sale agreement is signed, you remain the owner only until the closing, which won't be until late January. Between now and then, the house is still yours, which is exactly why you can give the notice. But I need you to be certain. There is no undoing this. I have spent 2 years undoing myself to fit inside their lives, Warren," I said. "I am finished undoing myself. Do it." He found the buyer faster than I expected. A man named Curtis Vance from a fund that bought houses in exactly our part of the city called me 2 days later. He was young and direct and offered $300,000 cash, as is $12,000 less than I had put in. I would lose a little money. I would keep everything else. We agreed to sign the purchase agreement on the 23rd of December with the closing set for the 29th of January, and Mr. Vance understood without my having to explain much that there were occupants who would need to be moved along in the lawful way, and that this did not trouble him in the least. His fund had done it many times. He seemed almost relieved that the owner was so clear about what she wanted. In the days before Christmas, I moved through my life with a strange steadiness. I went to Willowcrest Court one last time on the 22nd when I knew the house was empty, and I quietly gathered the few things of mine that were still there. A change of clothes in the storeroom that had once been my bedroom. 2 books. A small framed photograph of Ray that I had kept on the nightstand back when there had been a nightstand, back when it had been a room for me. I put my things in a canvas bag and I stood for a moment in the doorway of the room they had filled with boxes and an exercise bike, and I said goodbye to it because I knew I would never stand inside those walls again. That evening, Lauren sent me a message. "Mom, we're expecting you at 7 on Christmas Eve. Diane has everything handled, so just come and relax. I read it twice. We're expecting you. Not I want you there. Not it won't be the same without you. Just we're expecting you the way you expect the man who is coming to fix the furnace." I typed back, "I'll be there, my love." And I set the phone down on the table next to the folder that held the deed and the tax receipts, and the signed agreement selling the house out from under all of them, and the notice waiting that would give my daughter and her husband 30 days to leave the home I had bought. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest with you about that, because I think it matters. I did not feel the clean, bright joy you might expect. What I felt sitting there in my small apartment with the whole quiet machinery of it finally in place was closer to grief after all, but a grief that had already made its peace with itself. I was about to take back everything I had given, not out of hatred, not even in the end out of anger. I was doing it because I had finally learned at 61 years old in a kitchen where my own son-in-law called me a woman who would sign anything. The one lesson I had somehow gone my whole life without that love which asks you to disappear is not love at all. And that a mother is allowed even a mother to refuse to disappear. Outside, the first snow of the season had begun to fall over Columbus, soft and slow under the street lights. 2 days until Christmas Eve. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark and watched it come down. And I was not afraid. For the first time in 2 years, I knew exactly where I stood, and I knew that I was standing on my own 2 feet, in my own name, on ground that no one could sign away from underneath me. And I thought, let them raise their glasses. Let them toast their wonderful house. I would be there when they did, and I would be the one thing at that table that none of them had planned for. I woke on the morning of the 24th of December at 5 o'clock. I had slept perhaps 3 hours, but it was not the thin, anxious sleep of the past 2 years. It was the light watchfulness of a woman who knows she is about to cross a bridge and burn it behind her. On other Christmas Eves at that hour, I would already have been in the kitchen chopping onions for the cornbread dressing, the whole apartment filling with the smell of sage and butter that had always meant home. But this year there was no dressing to make, because I had been told gently and finally that I did not need to bring anything. So I made coffee instead, and watched the snow lie blue and untouched over the parking lot, and I waited for the day to begin. At 8, the phone rang, Lauren's voice bright and quick, the false brightness I had come to know. "Morning, Mom," she said. "Diane got here at 7 with everything, the whole dinner turkey ham. She even hired a girl to serve in the house I had paid for." "What time do you want me?" I said. "Dinner's at 7, but come earlier if you want to help set the table." They would not let me cook or plan or belong, but they would let me fold the napkins. "I'll be there at 6:30, I said. "Love you, Mom. Love you too, my love," I said, and I meant it, which was the strange and terrible part. At 10, I drove to Warren's office. He was waiting for me, though it was Christmas Eve, and the building was otherwise dark. He handed me a manila envelope, and inside it was the notice printed on heavy paper, his signature beside mine, every seal and citation in its proper place. It informed the occupants of the property on Willowcrest Court that they were required to leave the premises within 30 days, the property having been sold, the sole legal owner having exercised her full and lawful right. I read every word of it. Each one weighed on me. Each one set me a little freer. "You're certain," Warren said. Not because he doubted me, because that is what a good man does before a thing that cannot be undone. "They're going to react badly, Jenna. There will be shouting. Diane will call you cruel. Lauren will cry." "I know exactly what will happen, Warren," I said. "I have thought about very little else. And you still want to, especially because I've thought about it," I said. He nodded slowly. He walked me to the door, and there he stopped and said something I have kept with me. "You know, Jenna, in 40 years of this work, I have watched a great many people take back what was theirs. Almost none of them were happy doing it, but every one of them was free afterward. That is the trade. I understand the trade," I said. And I did. From his office I drove to my church, though I am not a woman who goes often. The sanctuary was empty and dim, and near the front stood the nativity, Mary and Joseph bent over the manger, a family gathered close in the cold. I sat in a back pew and did not pray for anything in particular. I only breathed. "Forgive me," I whispered at last, "if any of this is wrong. But I cannot go on the way I have been going." I did not wait for an answer, because the only answer that mattered had been given to me 2 nights before in a kitchen, and my own heart had already decided. At 5, I drew a bath and took my time. I put on a navy dress Ray had always liked and the pearl drop earrings he had given me on our last anniversary before he died 12 years gone now. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in longer than I could say, I recognized the woman looking back. Jenna Ellington, 61 years old, a widow, a nurse who had spent her life at the exact spot where new families begin. But under all of that, a woman with a right to be treated as one. I picked up my purse with the manila envelope inside and drove out into the Christmas dark toward Willowcrest Court. Every window I passed glowed warm and full. Happy families, whole tables, and me driving through the middle of it with a folded notice in my bag. I turned onto the street at 6:25. My house was lit like all the others, a wreath on the door, the young maples strung with white lights in the yard I had paid for. I parked, took 3 slow breaths, the kind I used to coach frightened mothers to take, and went up the walk and rang the bell. Grant opened the door in a red sweater with a reindeer stitched across the chest, a glass of wine in his hand, his smile wide and easy. "Mrs. Ellington," he said, "Merry Christmas. Come in, come in." I stepped inside. The house smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon. A tall tree stood in the corner hung with gold. The oak table I had given them, the one long enough to seat 8, was dressed in white linen and set with china and crystal, and I saw that a place had been laid at the far end of it, one lonely setting at the foot of the table as far from the head as a person could be put and still be said to have a seat. "Mom, you're here," Lauren said, coming out of the kitchen in an emerald dress, lovely and flushed and happy. "Merry Christmas, my love," I said, and I held her, and she gave me back a short, careful hug and stepped away. "Come meet everyone," she said. In the living room sat Diane on the good chair in a wine-colored dress, and her pearls, her silver hair perfect, holding court. Beside her were a young couple I did not know. "Mom," Lauren said, "this is Tyler and Brooke Grant's cousins. They came in from Cleveland." "A pleasure," I said, shaking their hands. "Mrs. Ellington," Diane said from her chair, without rising, without offering her hand. "How punctual you are." "Sit, sit." Roger came in from the kitchen with a fresh glass of wine and greeted me warmly, the only one of them who did, and I sat in a chair set slightly apart from the group in the living room of the house I had bought, surrounded by my son-in-law's family, growing fainter by the minute, exactly as I always did. For half an hour I listened to them talk. Diane told a long story about a cruise she and Roger had taken through the Greek islands, a cruise I thought that a woman losing her home to the bank had no business having taken, and Grant laughed in all the right places, and Lauren nodded at everything her mother-in-law said. And I sat there, and I was not in the room. At 7 o'clock exactly, Lauren stood and announced that dinner was ready and asked everyone to come to the table. We took our places. Diane sat at the very head, like the mistress of the house, Grant at her right hand, Lauren at her left. Roger and the cousins filled in along the sides. And I walked the length of my own oak table and sat down alone at the foot of it, as far from my daughter as that long, beautiful table could put me. And as I lowered myself into that chair, the last soft thing left in me finished quietly turning to stone. Grant carried in the turkey. Lauren brought the sides. Diane lifted her glass and the table went still, and she smiled her trophy smile and said, "Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words." Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine as well. "I want to thank the good Lord for this beautiful family we've built," she said. "For my son Grant, who makes me proud every single day. For Lauren, the daughter I always dreamed of. For this wonderful home where we're all gathered tonight. And for this perfect evening. To all of it. Cheers." "Cheers," they all said, and the crystal rang and they drank. I set my glass down on the linen without touching it to my lips, because I had just heard the only words I needed to hear. For this wonderful home. The home she had not paid for, the home she had come to take, the home that in a matter of minutes now would slip out of all their hands at once. I looked down the length of the table at my daughter. She was laughing at something Tyler had said, her head tipped back careless and happy, entirely unaware of me at the far end of the table she thought was hers. I set down my napkin. "Excuse me a moment," I said. No one so much as glanced up. No one asked if I was all right. I walked to the front hall, took out my phone, and sent Warren a single word. "Now." His reply came in seconds. "On the way. 15 minutes. I put the phone away, returned to my lonely place at the foot of the table, folded my hands and waited while they ate and laughed and told their stories, and Diane held forth. And no one wondered why the plain old woman at the end of the table had gone so still. At 7:30, the doorbell rang. Grant frowned and set down his fork. "Are we expecting anyone?" "No," Lauren said, puzzled. He rose and went to the door, and I heard low voices in the hall, and a moment later he came back into the dining room and the color had gone out of his face. "Lauren," he said, "there's someone here. He needs to speak with you." "Who is it?" she said, already rising, and the whole table had gone quiet, that particular concrete quiet, the quiet that falls when something is about to break. She went into the hall. The rest of us sat. Diane frowned and set her mouth. "A caller on Christmas Eve," she said. The nerve. And then from the hall, Lauren's voice. What is this?" We all rose then and went toward the door. Lauren stood in the front hall with an opened envelope in her shaking hands, her face white, and Grant reading over her shoulder, his lips moving, saying, No, this can't be right." "What is it?" Roger asked. Lauren turned and her eyes found me, and they were full of tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of fury. "Did you do this?" she said. They all turned and looked at me, and I looked back at my daughter, and I did not look away. "Yes, Lauren," I said, "I did. You sold the house." "Yes." "How could you?" "Because it is my house, Lauren," I said. "It always was." "But we live here," she cried. "You live here," I said, "and you have 30 days to make other arrangements." Grant took a step toward me, the notice crushed in his fist. "Mrs. Ellington, there's been a mistake. You can't do this. You promised us this house." "I never promised you anything, Grant," I said, and my voice did not shake. "I told you that one day I might sign it over to you. That day was going to come. And then 2 days ago I heard how you meant to make it come." The room went silent in a new way. Diane stepped forward, her face gone red beneath its powder. "This is an outrage," she said. "This is theft. You cannot put my son out on the street." I turned and looked at her fully for the first time all evening. "Your son is not on the street, Diane," I said. "Your son has 30 days and a mother who has just come back from a Greek cruise, so I'm sure the family can manage." Her mouth opened and no sound came out. Lauren came toward me trembling. "Mom, why? Why are you doing this to us? Are you really asking me that?" I said. She flinched. "Where was my dressing tonight, Lauren? Where was my pie? Where was my place at this table?" She said nothing. "Exactly," I said. "There was no place for me, but there was a place for all of them." "Because I don't accept Grant's family," she burst out. "No, Lauren," I said. "Because Grant's family does not accept me and you let them. For 2 years you let them." And then I said the rest of it quietly in front of all of them, because they had made me small in front of exactly these people, and I would take myself back in front of them too. Shall I tell everyone the rest? I said. Shall I tell them why Diane was so very eager to have me gone by Christmas? Diane's face changed. Roger's head came up. "I understand the bank began foreclosure on your house in September, Diane," I said. "I understand you are about to lose it. And I understand that there happened to be a paid-off house right here full of your son and his obliging wife and one plain old woman who was in the way. That's why the sudden hurry, isn't it? You needed somewhere to land." "That's a lie," Diane said, but her voice had gone thin and Roger was staring at his wife as though seeing her for the first time. "It is a matter of public record," I said. "My lawyer found it in an afternoon. And there is one thing more." I turned to Grant. "On the 27th, 2 days after Christmas, you had a signing scheduled. A quitclaim deed. You meant to sit me down with a stack of papers and a kind story about how the 2 years were finally up and have me sign this house over to you. And the moment I did, you meant to borrow against it to save that failing restaurant of yours. You weren't going to protect this house for the family. You were going to spend it." Grant's face had gone gray. How he said, "How could you possibly?" "The signing company called me by mistake," I said. "To confirm an appointment I never made. That is how close I came, Grant. That is how nearly it worked." Lauren was shaking her head, tears running now. "Mom, it wasn't." "Don't, Lauren," I said, and something in my voice stopped her. "I heard you. That is the part I will carry the longest. 2 days ago I stood in that kitchen and I heard your husband on the phone, and I heard him say that you had been softening me up for weeks, planting the idea gently, so that I would sign like a good, grateful mother. I heard him say that I had never once said no to you in my life, and never would. that I would sign anything you put in front of me, and thank you for the privilege. I looked at my daughter, and for a moment I saw the little girl in the white coat who had said everything I am I owe to you. Well, I said, here is the no Lauren. Here it is, at last. And then I told them the last thing, the thing none of them had understood all evening, the thing that changes the meaning of everything that came before. You've all been looking at me tonight, I said, the way you always look at me. As though I wandered in and did something rash. As though I'm a foolish, hurt old woman who lashed out. But I want you to understand something. When Lauren sent me that message 9 days ago at 3 a.m, telling me I was not wanted at this dinner, I did not fall apart. I answered it with one word. Understood. And then I got up and I went to my lawyer and I began. Every day that you thought I was quietly accepting my place, I was working. While you planted your idea gently over your Christmas coffee, I was reading the deed. While you set out my little chair away from the group, I was signing the sale. This house was already sold, Diane, before you ever raised your glass to it. I have not been sitting at the foot of this table all night because I was too plain to sit anywhere else. I have been sitting here because I wanted to watch you toast a house that was already gone. Diane Prescott sank into the nearest chair. The woman who had called me plain, who had counted on the plain old woman signing anything, sat down hard and understood all at once that the house she had planned to escape into was never going to be hers, that the plan that was going to save her had collapsed while she was telling a story about the Greek islands. Lauren was crying openly now. Mom, please, can we fix this? Can we talk? I picked up my purse. You have until the 23rd of January, I said. The new owner has already signed. The papers are done. There is nothing to undo. Mom, you can't just leave like this, she said. Of course I can, I said, and I walked to the door. She followed me. Mom, please, please. I stopped with my hand on the door of the house I had paid for and would never enter again, and I turned and looked at her. Do you know the saddest part, Lauren, I said. I would have given anything to hear you say please 2 months ago. But now it's too late. It's never too late, Mom, she said. For some things it is, I said. Merry Christmas, my love. And I opened the door and walked out into the snow, and I heard the noise begin behind me, the shouting and the accusations, Diane's voice rising, and Roger's low and hard, the whole careful evening coming apart. I got into my car and drove away, and I did not look back, because if I looked back I might weaken, and I could not afford to weaken. Not now, not when I had only just found my own voice. I drove without any destination through the bright empty streets. Everyone was home. Every house I passed was full. And I was alone with my heart beating and my face perfectly calm, the way I had spent a lifetime being calm for other people. Only now I was being calm for myself. At last I pulled off at an overlook on the edge of the city, and below me Columbus lay spread out in glittering thousands of lights in the dark. Every light a house a family. And there in that great quiet, I finally breathed all the way to the bottom of my lungs for the first time in 2 years. I took out my phone. 15 missed calls from Lauren, 1 from Gail. I opened Gail's first. Jenna, are you all right? Lauren called me sobbing. I don't know what to say except that I love you. I wrote back, I'm all right, sister. Better than all right. Then I read Lauren's messages come in one after another, the whole arc of her from fury to fear. How could you ruin our Christmas? Mom, answer me. And then near the end, the one meant to cut deepest. I wish Dad were alive to see what you've become. I sat with that one a long time. She had reached for Ray, the man who loved me, and would have stood between me and any storm, and she had tried to use him as a knife. Then I typed my answer, the only one I would send. Lauren, I wrote. I'll answer once, then turn off my phone. I did not ruin your Christmas. It was ruined the moment you decided I wasn't wanted at it. I'm not the woman you think I've become. I'm the woman I always should have been and wasn't brave enough to be until now. As for your father, he would be proud of me tonight because he taught me that respect is the ground love stands on, and you forgot that. I love you, and I always will, but I will not be invisible in your life again. When you are ready to talk honestly without shouting, without Diane, without a paper for me to sign. I'll be here. Not before. Merry Christmas. I turned off the phone and put it in the glove box, and I sat at that overlook until nearly midnight. I had not done this to hurt her. I had done it to save myself. Because if I had gone on 1 more year, or 2, or 5, I would have ended a ghost in my own family, a woman who existed only to be useful, and that is not a life. It is a slow disappearance. And I was done disappearing. I drove home near midnight through the falling snow. I climbed my stairs and I let myself into my small apartment. No imported curtains, no gold-framed photographs of a family I did not belong to, but mine entirely, and only mine. I took off Ray's earrings and set them in their dish. I made a cup of chamomile tea. And then at last, alone in my own home, I let myself cry. I cried for the daughter I had lost and for the little girl in the white coat who had once thought I hung the moon. I cried for the Christmas I had always imagined and would never have. But I also cried from something like relief, because I would never again have to smile while something in me died. I cried until I had no crying left, and when it was finished I felt hollowed out and light, as though I had set down a weight I had been carrying so long I had stopped feeling it as weight, and started feeling it as myself. I went to bed and I looked at the dark ceiling, and I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Jenna. You did it. You're still here." And for the first time in 2 years, I slept the whole night through. The days after were strange and quiet. I did not turn my phone back on for a week. I read books I had been meaning to read for years. I walked in the cold, clean mornings. I sat in a coffee shop and let the time go by with nothing owed to anyone. On the 27th, the day I was to have signed away my house, Gail came to see me worried, searching my face for damage. "Is there really no way to mend this?" she asked. "Mend it how, Gail?" I said. "By giving them back the house. By apologizing for refusing to vanish." She was quiet. Then she said, "If I'm honest, I'd have done the same." "I know you would have," I said. She stayed the whole afternoon, and we talked about our childhood, about our parents, about the summers at our grandmother's place, back when family was a simple thing. Before she left, she held me hard at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you did right." Those words held me up for days. Lauren and Grant left before the notice ran out on the 23rd of January. They found a small 2-bedroom apartment across town in a plainer part of the city than the one Diane approved of. Once the house stood empty, the sale closed at the end of the month, exactly as Warren had arranged. Curtis Vance's fund took the keys to Willowcrest Court and began turning it into a rental, and it passed cleanly out of the story, out of all our hands, and became a house where strangers would live, which seemed somehow exactly right. I did not spend the money. I put most of it back where it had come from, into the account meant to let me grow old without being a burden to anyone. But I kept a little aside, and with it I did 2 things I had wanted to do for 30 years. I joined a quilting circle that met on Thursday mornings, and I began slowly and badly at first to make something with my hands only for the pleasure of it. And I joined a group of older women who gathered on Tuesday evenings to talk without shame about the shapes their lives had taken. There I learned my story was not unusual at all. Mothers who had given until they vanished. Mothers who had made themselves small to keep the peace. Mothers who had finally, late and frightened, chosen themselves. One evening, a retired schoolteacher named Frances took my hand and said, "You're a brave woman, Jenna." "I wasn't brave," I said. "I was just tired." "That's the same thing," she said. "Brave isn't feeling no fear. It's being worn all the way down and taking the step anyway." She was right. I had not been fearless. I had been terrified of losing my daughter, and I had chosen, in spite of the terror, not to lose myself. Lauren and I did not speak for a long time. Then, in the middle of February, a message came. "Mom, can we talk? Just you and me." And I wrote back, "Yes, but only you. Not Grant, not Diane, no one else, and nothing to sign. If you can come like that, we can talk." She came on a Saturday morning without makeup, with shadows under her eyes, in jeans and an old sweatshirt, carrying 2 boxes of the things I had left behind. We sat in my small living room and drank coffee in a silence that hurt. And at last she said, "Mom, I need to understand." "Why like that? In front of everyone?" "Because you made me small in front of everyone," I said. "For 2 years. And I decided I would take myself back the same way." She lowered her eyes. "I didn't realize I was hurting you," she said. "You didn't realize I said, or you didn't want to?" She was quiet a long time. "Because it was easier to please Diane than to defend you," she said finally, and there it was, the whole truth laid down at last between us. "Yes," I said, "it was." We talked for a long time that morning, more honestly than we had in years. She told me the restaurant had failed anyway, that Grant had had to face the debt in the open without a house to hide it behind. She told me Diane had had nowhere to go after all, and had been forced to face her own ruin instead of stepping into ours, and that she and Roger had moved into a small rented condo. And she told me with wonder in her voice, that for the first time in his life, Grant had stood up to his mother, telling her she would treat me with respect or she would not be in their lives, and that it had cost him something, and he had done it anyway. I did not gloat over any of it. I felt no joy hearing that Diane was brought low, only something quieter like a scale coming level. I had not done this for revenge. I had done it to survive. That the people who schemed against me now lived with the consequences of their own choices was not my doing. That is simply the shape the world takes given time. It arrives on its own. It only needs your refusal to keep saving people from themselves. At the end of that first honest morning, Lauren asked me, "Is there a way back?" And I told her the truth. "There is a way forward," I said. "Not back. Back is where the invisible woman lives, and I'm not going there again. But forward if you truly want it, and if it comes with respect and boundaries and no more pretending." She said she wanted it. And I said we could try slowly, and that if she ever made me disappear again, I would walk away, and that time it would be for good. She nodded, and she understood, and we began carefully like two people learning to walk on ground that had once given way beneath them. It has been 2 years now since that Christmas Eve. 2 years since I sat at the foot of my own table and watched a woman toast a house that was already gone. I am 63 years old as I tell you this, sitting by my window with a cup of coffee going cool in my hands, and the morning sun coming across the floor, and I can tell you that it was the hardest thing I have ever done, and the most necessary, and I would do it again. Lauren and I are something new now. Not the old thing where I gave everything and she took it without seeing me. Something between two grown women who choose each other on purpose. We have coffee on Wednesdays, just the two of us. We walk in the park when the weather allows. And this past autumn, she came to my apartment on a Sunday morning with a bag of donuts and a nervous smile, and took both my hands in hers and told me she was going to have a baby and that she wanted me. Truly wanted me to be the grandmother. She had had the one who showed up, the one who stayed. I held my daughter and I wept, and this time the tears were only joy. Grant came to see me too on his own. "Mrs. Ellington," he said, "what happened was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and the best, and I know how strange that sounds. I was living the life my mother wanted for me, and couldn't see it, and if you hadn't done what you did, I'd be living it still. I have a small life now, but it's mine, and that's worth more than a house." I took the hand of the man who had once called me a woman who would sign anything, and I told him I was glad and I meant it. Diane and I never became friends and never will, but something settled between us, a cold, clean truce. We are polite at the birthdays now. She does not look at me as a thing in her way, and I do not look at her as an enemy, and that is enough. Losing the house humbled her in ways nothing else could have. I do not need her apology to be at peace. Life gave her back the size of her own choices all on its own without a push from me. That is the thing I understand now. It is not revenge. It is balance. It is the slow, patient way the world has of teaching you that what you plant is what you will one day sit down to eat. Yesterday was Christmas. This time Lauren and Grant hosted in their small apartment, the table not long enough to seat 8, no girl hired to serve, and it was the warmest room I have stood in for years. Roger and Diane came, and Gail came, and I brought my cornbread dressing, the very dressing that was once turned away to go cold in a plastic dish. This time there was none left over. Every plate came back for more. And when Grant raised his glass, he looked down the short, crowded table and said, "I want to thank the women at this table. My mother, who is learning to love people without needing to run their lives. My wife, who is my whole world. And Mrs. Ellington, who taught this family the hardest thing we ever had to learn, that love without respect isn't love, and that the kindest thing a person can sometimes do is refuse to let you keep treating her badly." Everyone raised their glasses, Diane among them, and there at that small, crowded table, I felt more at home than I ever had in the big house on Willowcrest Court. Because a home is not measured in square feet. It is measured in respect and presence, and the kind of love that has room in it for you. After dinner, Lauren and I stood at her narrow sink washing dishes, the baby asleep in the next room. "Mom," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you regret it?" "Selling the house." I dried a plate slowly and thought about it because she deserved a true answer. "No," I said, "I don't." "But you lost so much money," she said. "I didn't lose money, my love," I said. "I traded it for something worth more." For what she said. "For my dignity," I said. "For my peace. And in the end for this. For us standing here." She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. "I regret it, Mom," she said. "Not the house. I regret that I had to lose you to learn how to love you. I put my arm around my daughter. We didn't lose each other, I said. We found each other again on better ground. Do you forgive me? She asked. I forgave you a long time ago, I said. The work now is for you to forgive yourself. And we stood there in that small, warm kitchen, my daughter and I, two women with scars and lessons and a love that had been broken and rebuilt into something sturdier than it ever was when it was whole and easy. I want to say one thing more before I go. If you saw something of yourself in me tonight, know this. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not a bad mother for drawing a line. You are not cruel for refusing to disappear. You deserve respect from your children, from your family, but above all from yourself. Love that requires you to vanish is not love. It is sacrifice dressed up as virtue, and sacrifice without respect is only a slow way of losing yourself. So do not make yourself small to fit a place that does not value you. You are enough exactly as you are, and if someone cannot see that the failing is theirs, not yours. Sometimes you have to lose in order to find and let go in order to be given back something better. And even when it is dark, even when it feels as though you will not survive the losing, you will. I know because I did. And if I could, at 61 years old, plain and tired and frightened, then so can you. Thank you for staying with me to the end of it. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs it, some mother who is fading, some woman who feels invisible at her own table. Because sometimes a single story is enough to turn a life. And if it turned yours even a little, then everything I lost and everything I found was worth it. God keep you. And never forget, your worth was never in how much you gave away. Your worth is simply that you are here,